to Inspirational Transformational TV show. Amy Whitney here today with my very special guest, Feir Johnson. If you have even the slightest interest in hypnotherapy, I have got an interview for you today. Feir Johnson's passion, her knowledge, her experience is amazing. In our 45 minutes together, I learned so much and felt so inspired by the time I left that I know you're going to enjoy the show today with Feir Johnson. Feir Johnson, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me today.
I'm glad to be here in my own chair.
You're the founder of Innisfree School of Hypnosis Education and a doctor of clinical hypnotherapy. I know a little bit about your story, but I think a great place to start today would be if you took us back to the point where you started down your path of hypnotherapy.
Well, I guess that would be after I retired from teaching. I worked for 33 years in education, and I was fortunate enough to be out of the classroom for 4 years and actually studying how people learn. And that involved a lot of consciousness and right brain, left brain, and the 9 intelligences and how people internalize things and how people do it. And I became fascinated by that. So when I retired, that was the thing that stayed in my mind. I had no idea I was going to do this. So I was sort of sitting in a beautiful home watching a river run by saying, well, the only thing I'm kind of interested in is hypnosis. But where I live, out in the Kawarthas, how am I going to learn? And sure enough, came a flyer to my door that a course is being offered. And I also said, being a teacher, well, it better be somebody who really knows. And the man was a doctor of psychiatric nursing. And I thought, well, I guess that challenge was answered. So I took the basic training. And when I took the basic training, it was the same as a lot of other schools. It was 3 long weekends and then work between and case studies and then 3 more long weekends. And frankly, I didn't find it enough. I started working and I realized there were so many things I didn't know why, or I didn't know how to help. Okay. And that's how I decided I needed to learn more. So I started to Google everything. Where were schools that would give me more information? And I was fortunate to find Briar State. Now, Briar State is online. You have to already be a hypnotist to do it, and you also have to have an academic background. So I was accepted into that, and strangely enough, although the place was American, the professor is Canadian. So I would end up sending all my papers to Alberta that would then be sent to United States. So I am accredited in Alabama, but of course Canada doesn't even recognize hypnosis, let alone a title. So I very rarely use that title except to show people that, yes, I put 3 extra years in here and it cost me a lot, and it was a lot of study and a lot of hard work. And what it ended up doing was giving me a lot of confidence in many areas that I had been asked to look at and had passed on because I didn't think I knew enough. So that's how I got into it.
Beautiful. So can you take me back now? You mentioned that... did I hear you correct that there's no accreditation in Canada, and is that why I've also heard some people just study it for 6 weeks and call themselves a practitioner? Is that how that happened?
They can do that because it's not regulated in Canada.
Okay. And
what has happened is the Medical Association it has a strange love affair with hypnosis. Hypnosis, they say, has been studied and studied and studied by the Medical Association. And online, if you look up PubMed, you can see that it works for just about anything. However, not many doctors know how to use it or have even been told about it. Yet, when they feel that hypnosis is somehow infringing, the Mental Health Association and sometimes the Medical Association begin to say, you have no right to use this. Mm-hmm. Even though a non-medical hypnotist never, ever touches a medical situation. And we mean mental health too, because I'm not trained in that. The only time I do a medical situation is when a person comes to me and says, the doctor's given up, I'm just supposed to stay on pills for life. Mm-hmm. Can hypnosis help this? And if it can, I'll say yes, but I'm certainly not going to tell you not to take pills, and I'm certainly not going to tell you not to be working with your doctor, but you might want to bring him some of this information. And strangely enough, even though fibromyalgia has been cured in this office, or stopped, I think I should say the word stopped, the doctor wasn't interested. Looked at all the x-rays of the person before and after, wasn't interested enough to say, why on earth did hypnosis work in only 5 sessions?
So would the medical system chalk it up to placebo?
Yes, but you know, placebo is hypnosis, isn't it?
Good point.
Yes, if you want to, if you believe this is going to work, it works, and that's what hypnosis is. All of us have this trait in our character. We all have consciousness. So what we believe, we make happen.
It happens?
Yes, that's what placebo is. Also, there's something called nocebo.
I haven't heard that.
No, well, nocebo is when somebody informs you that death, destruction, and doom will happen, and you happen to believe this person, and it does. And it happens very often in medicine. There's actually a study of cancer, and pretty bad cancer at that. And where the doctors said you had 3 months to live or something, they did autopsies on people who died in 3 months. And they found, yes, they had cancer, but no, they didn't have to die in 3 months. But their subconscious said, well, I guess time's up. The person I believe in said it. And that's called the nocebo effect. And people in authority, like teachers and doctors and politicians even, need to be very, very careful of their words and how they talk to people.
Everyone does. That's a perfect statement, actually. Now, you mentioned that hypnosis, is it that you can't claim to treat medical conditions, or...
Oh, no.
Okay, and so what type of conditions are suitable for hypnosis? What do you like to treat?
Well, any condition, so far the people in Canada have the rights to decide how they will look after themselves.
Nice.
We're fortunate that way. So I always say on my intake form that you should tell your doctor you're doing this. Okay. But when it's a doctor, a medical doctor, they have the right to come to me. And I will say whether, hypnosis works or not. Fibromyalgia is a big one because it's a mind-body disorder, according to hypnosis, according to Dr. John Sarno, who's a medical doctor, and according to several others. So irritable bowel syndrome, fibromyalgia, seen them stopped cold in this office in 4 or 5 sessions. And it's really the person saying, I'm going to think about this a different way. Is my mind playing around with my body? And we don't do psychoanalysis here because that's a conscious trait that the mental health field does. Also, I don't go along with labels. I know I'm digressing a bit, but the field of hypnosis, and it's not a modality, it's a field, has its own labels. Why would we want to use somebody else's labels? So a person comes with all their collection of symptoms and whatever, and we have quite a good talk. I recommend reading of these doctors, medical doctors who've looked it up and have stopped all kinds of pains and aches and things that the mind seems to be doing. And I seem to be the person you can come to after the doctor has said, I've done all I can. Just stay on these drugs for the rest of your life. And that makes it all right for me. The other thing that hypnosis does is pain. It's well known that it can help control or eliminate pain, especially in burn victims.
Yes. Is there anything that, I don't know, I hear sometimes people say, hypnosis could be dangerous because you kind of lose control of how you're thinking. Is that like kind of an old wives' tale?
I'm just running a lot of thoughts through my mind about that one. I have a theory that hypnosis is only dangerous in the hands of people who are poorly trained or entertainers.
Okay.
And it's only dangerous because if an entertainer is doing it, they have no idea what's going on with the person in their audience. And since we all have a subconscious and we all have a conscious mind, that entertainer may be thinking, oh, we'll just work with people, to make it look silly, and they don't mind looking silly on stage because most people who come up don't mind that. But Sometimes they've had some pretty rough stuff happen in their backgrounds, and that's maintained. And that entertainer may inadvertently do something that sparks that person to remember that. And then a whole crisis can happen, and we call these abreactions. And often the entertainer does not know how to handle that abreaction. Any well-trained hypnotist certainly does. And so you don't play with it. It's a field, it's not a game.
Can you give me an example, or the audience an example of an abreaction?
An abreaction?
Sorry.
An abreaction is, again, a little digression. It's a debatable term for hypnosis. Some hypnosis schools refuse to accept that there should be or will be. I was not trained that way. I was trained that if a person has had some really tough stuff happen in their life, and they're looking at that, they may remember that as a child and how scared they were or whatever. And so they'll react like a child, and they'll scream, and they'll have great fear.
Okay.
And the well-trained hypnotist can get them out of that very quickly. And there's no reason to go there, there's no reason to stay there. But we do, at that point, know what one of the buttons that's being pushed for them is.
Yeah. I'm not, as you can tell by the way, me just failing to pronounce the term correctly, I'm not that familiar with hypnotherapy. But I understand there are different schools of thought. You mentioned it. So, and I've heard of Ericksonian, is that correct? Ericksonian, is that a school?
Oh, Ericksonian, yes. Erickson,
okay. Is that something like that's worthwhile to speak about, the different schools, that ways of training? Or?
Erickson is often taught as an advanced class after the basic training, if the person wants to do it at all. One of the things I found when I started my big search into learning about hypnosis was how little we had actually been taught.
Okay.
And the Erickson field is very complex, very sophisticated, and works. And it's my thing. My thesis was on Erickson, and I truly believe in it. It's using words, metaphors, similes, and underneath those words, metaphors, and similes are other suggestions. And it allows a person not to be resistant. And there really is no resistance in hypnosis, but sometimes if a person comes at it too strongly and says, "You will never smoke again," the mind will say, "Oh yeah?" And rather than have that happen, if you seem to be telling a story about something totally other than that, and it involves not smoking, very often the subconscious says, "I'll go along with that. I can live with that, and I'll release some stress at the same time." But there's quite I guess a background in having to do it. A lot of study. Many people just don't understand it, and so they give up on it. Some people say it's just scripting. Oh no, scripting is just reading some words. This is changing grammar. Okay. This is not writing in sentences. This is changing the tone of your voice, the speed of your voice. It's a great many things, lots of pauses, all kinds of things like that.
And they all have a significant purpose.
Oh, yes. Every single word you say does.
Even just describing it, that's almost overwhelming for me, because I think that would be a really intense study to take up. Now, you've mentioned...
It is. Yeah. My students have to do it, too.
I'm glad you brought up your students, because that's a good segue into what I want to move into, because my sense is, when you describe your level of training and what you do at your school, it's a world of difference from a lot of the things that are out there. Can you, I don't know, I don't want you to be put in a compromising position, but can you describe the difference between your training versus maybe a 6-week course? Is that a
Well, as
question?
I said, I did the 6-week course, and it's very rushed. That is, here's how you do it, not why you do it.
Okay.
And you don't get much background about the techniques you're using.
Okay.
One of the things I found, and as a teacher researcher, this bugged me, was a lot of times processes weren't credited to the person who came up with them.
Okay.
So, as a result, I wanted to know who said this, why did they say this, and how does it work?
Okay.
And that's not usually, because it's too darn rushed. There's usually, if other training tends to belong to associations. Associations often say, you can teach this, but you won't teach that. You have to do it this way, you can't do it that way. Trust me, I belong to 4. And I let them all, because that's just my spirit. If there's a very good way that helps people, I'm not going to give it up simply because an association tells me I can't use that very good way. But I will study it to death before I use it. One of the things I did, and I certainly wasn't going to get into this, was transpersonal hypnosis. Now, transpersonal hypnosis is the past life stuff.
Okay.
Spirit release, negative energy release, all that sort of stuff. That was not of interest to me. And I have to laugh because, of course, the way my life went, I had to become very interested in it. But it started happening with clients.
Okay.
Some of my first clients that came to me were what I call natural psychics and real psychics. And natural psychics have had a lot of metaphysical experiences, but they didn't think it was important to tell me.
Okay.
And so they tend to react differently in hypnosis. Well, I knew nothing about that. So when I found that, I thought I owed these people a responsibility to be able to help them in this situation. So I flew to Calgary, and I took an intensive course and stayed in touch with the gentleman who taught it.
Okay.
Because it was very difficult. For me, it was challenging. I had to go past my own belief structure to do it. But I did it because people needed it.
Okay.
And then I found it working. This is another thing that generally isn't taught in your regular course. And you need to know this, because what do you do if this happens with a client?
Yes.
You can't just say, I'm sorry, we're going to stop shop now. You've got to be able to help them. This is very serious stuff, this field.
Right. Well, you mentioned that someone with psychic tendencies reacts different in hypnotherapy. What do you mean by that?
Well, some of them have done a lot of meditating. And some of them just have always had their guides along with them. Now, when you study hypnosis and you really study this consciousness, that's how far you go. You go close up and you can work with fibro in the body and whatever. But consciousness doesn't have walls around it. So it goes forever, like the universe. And it takes you into these areas that there is no proof about, but you experience.
Okay.
And fortunately, quantum mechanics and things are experiencing that too. So there are a lot of PhDs out there saying that, yes, there's life after death. Yes, energy continues it. And trust me, I read all those books just so I could feel confident in it. So these people may be in hypnosis, and suddenly you find yourself talking to their guides. Or suddenly you find yourself talking to an energy that's with them that needs to be released, even if you're just doing smoking. And if that occurs, you need to know what to do with it. And you don't have time to say, I don't believe in this, and my association says I shouldn't ever look at this. You have to say, then I have to use Plan B. And you have to know what Plan B is. So I teach my students all of this. That's why it's a 6-month intensive program with 5 or more hours between the times they meet with me, and they have to stay in touch with me by computer during the week.
Wow.
And they do learn this, and they do learn Erickson. They learn all these things, and people drop out. It's just too tough. You know, the magic is gone. I want the magic gone. This is very much reality.
Right. Tough.
It is very tough.
How does understanding a past life benefit your current life?
Only, for me, only if it's a healing situation.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's recreational. I suppose if you're on the spiritual path and you want to know about these things and you believe in reincarnation, that would be nice, but it can very often just be your subconscious making up a wonderful story.
Yes.
But if you go back, and I never do past life before maybe the 4th session.
Okay.
The person needs to be able to be in charge of their own subconscious and their own altered state, because otherwise they'll just get what they want to get. So everybody can be Cleopatra or Henry VIII if they want to be. Most of the time go back to being a farmer or whatever. And while it's very exciting for the person going back, it's kind of boring for the hypnotist. So, but we do find what was something they brought from that. And it could be an ache, a pain, a way of perceiving life. And we can clear it up and we can cut the connection with it. And the other thing you have to realize is there is no past. And when you actually study consciousness, it all happens at the same time. So I think of this as a Russian doll. Here we are in the middle, and then we have this and this and this around us. So this is just a life that's interfering with the life that's in the middle of the doll.
Can you expand on that for the audience? I understand it, but I think that's going to go.
Again, a lot of reading because I want to know why these things are, what these things are, and what some of the great minds are saying about it. But in all the reading, it says that our human dimension is the only one that uses time.
Okay.
That past, present, and future actually happen at the same time. So you really can't say there was a life way back when, even though we can call it in human terms that way. But if we look at it metaphysically, it's all happening at the same time. And it's sort of like there's a focus, and so we are focusing on the ones we're speaking to right now. But surrounding you, surrounding me, are many, many lives we don't see. And guess what? They're happening at the same time as what we're doing. So we can jump from one to the other, and sometimes that happens inadvertently. And so that past life may give us something we don't want. We can be disconnected from it. We can also use some of the wonderful attributes from those lives.
Wonderful. You also help people develop psychic skills, is that correct?
Nope.
Darn. I was about to say no.
No, I work with very few people who have psychic skills.
Okay.
There is no way on earth, or metaphysically, I can make a person have psychic skills. And it's something I discovered, again, when I took this extra training. And I studied about, well, hypnosis seems to be the thing that would help people. And of course, I was an Edgar Cayce reader for quite a long time. I discovered that he used self-hypnosis to get to the levels he needed to get to in order to tell people these wonderful things that he did. And so I became very interested in that. And I actually contacted the man who knew the self-hypnosis that Edgar Cayce used. And bless the man, he sent me his books free and everything and how to do that. So I naively said, well, let's see where we can go with this. And it was a lot of learning for me too. And I discovered that the only people I really can work with are people who already have these skills and have a very, very strong, grounded ego. Because to my cost, I found that some people couldn't, even though they had this gift and whatever, they couldn't maintain it in a way I thought they should. Also, I found that some people just couldn't walk the walk. If you're going to have these wonderful skills, and we're talking about channeling and deep trance channeling, things like that, you're going to have these skills, then I think you have to be as honest as you can be. You will never be perfect, but you must always be working on the integrity of yourself and walking the walk. And that means cleaning up your act. And you do it through hypnosis. If you're on great amounts of drugs to calm your anxiety, how can you possibly channel and help another person with anxiety? What level are you going to go to? So I discovered trial and error myself, and my first major psychic was where I lived before I lived here, and she was wonderful. And I thought, well, that's how everything was going to be. Not quite. Next psychic could just lie back and allow his body to be used. And then my present one that I work with, Nancy Broers, she can do that too. And she has the wonderful ability of being present or not present while this is happening. And what happens, it takes a long time. They have to practice a lot. And various energies and spirits come through that aren't really the highest level. There's a whole learning in there. And many people think if they're a spirit, they're just wonderful. You can get mischievous spirits. You can get negative energy masquerading as spirits. And for some reason, I seem to know. So I can challenge them.
Okay.
But when we get to the highest level, there's a certain communication that happens with me. And they greet me. And I know we're there.
Okay.
And we start working together. And that's, as you've seen with Nancy, that's where she is now.
Wow. And as you've journeyed, you retired from teaching, you started this hypnotherapy journey. Are you taking this to a whole new level past what other people in this field have taken?
I'd love to believe so.
Because it's just the way what you're speaking about, it just has a different frequency to...
Well, it's actually why I remade my website.
Right.
And it's with gold lettering. And I say it's a gold standard. It's not the gold standard. There are some phenomenally good hypnotists out there who are teaching well. They're not well known because they don't belong to the big associations, but I think they're gold standards too. And they say get over the magic, because of course it looks like magic, and of course it feels like magic, but it's something we all have. I mean, we all ride bicycles and don't think about riding bicycles. That's your subconscious working.
Yes.
So, but it's a little bit of a challenge, yes, because I grew very tired of picking up the pieces after a hypnotist who didn't know enough didn't do well with clients, and I ended up with them.
Mm.
And I thought, this can't be. It's a field, it's not a modality, and people must really study it and continue studying it. And I really wanted to get students and graduates out there doing it well. And for that reason, I only take college or university people. And that's not because of the status of college or university. I want people who have had to burn the midnight oil,
Okay.
who've had to meet deadlines, who've been told they're not good enough, work harder. And so my attitude is not, so you came, paid your money, therefore you graduate.
Yes.
I have not certified some people because they have not proven to me that they know how to do it.
Wow.
So I'll never make a whole bunch of money on this one.
But, yeah, you never know. Do you take distance education students, or do they have to come to
Never.
college?
I don't think it can be done that way.
Okay.
I have usually 3 in a class. 4, I'm having trouble getting to everybody.
Okay.
And because I'm very hands-on, I demonstrate in front of them. Everybody who comes to me must experience all the hypnosis they're going to use.
Okay.
And must work on their own issues, because there's not one of us who doesn't have them. So it's life-changing for them, as well as paradigm-changing too, because they go further and further in their own understanding of consciousness. I don't know how that would work distance-wise.
Okay.
I've thought about it a lot, but if I have to bend the ceiling of what I want, I won't do it.
Yes. What's been your, I don't want to use the word favorite, but do you have a case history that you could share? Obviously changing names, but something that you go, this is so cool.
That's so cool. Oh my gosh, I wasn't ready for that one. What stays in my mind is fibromyalgia, and I'm sure I have many other really good ones. But I'll talk about this woman because she actually is a supporter of what has happened, and she's not on the computer, but she's on the telephone. And she always says if somebody comes to me for fibromyalgia help, she'll be quite happy to talk to them.
Nice.
So let's do her.
Okay.
Okay, she came to me for an entirely other reason. And she was a bit on the spiritual side, but at that point, she wanted to know what had happened in her past and whatever. And I had told her, I never give evidence at a trial, because the subconscious can give you what you need for healing, and it may not be true. And sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. So my focus is this helping you change? And she was willing to do this. And I was so concerned about it, I only said, we'll do it one at a time. One session at a time. If you feel you're not getting anything out of it, or I feel it, we'll stop. Well, she got a lot out of it. And by the fourth session, she'd had past lives, and she had had found out things that had happened in her past that when she checked with the family really had happened. And I was about to wave her off. And she said, I have fibromyalgia and I'd really like some help with that. And in a way, because she'd had 4 sessions, she was ready.
Yes.
And I was amazed because when she gave me the sheet of the drug she was on, it was almost a page long. She could not walk out of her house. She had 4 dogs, and she couldn't even walk them. She was totally incapacitated. Her husband was at his wit's end about it. And she said, "This helped me so much. Will you try this?" And I think she was almost my first fibromyalgia person. And so I did an enormous amount of reading on it and set up the program for her. And I think for her, it only took 4 sessions. Of course, if somebody was starting fresh, it'd probably take 8. And we looked at how she was using her mind to harm her body. And she was worried about, how she was reacting to life. And I taught her EFT, emotional frequency techniques, and she used this on herself a lot. And she had a will of steel. I love that. And she decided she'd start taking herself off drugs. And I said, "Tell your doctor." And then it was up to her to be a big girl and whatever. And she went through withdrawal. And she said, "I could stand this for 3 days." And actually now I know that hypnosis would have helped her with that. But I didn't know enough. So she just gradually reduced her medication to nothing. And as she did that, she was finding aches and pains weren't there. She worked on, I have hypnosis recordings, we had sessions together, and as she moved on to redeveloping herself, she got to the point, I said, "How far can you walk your dogs? 5 feet? Okay, walk your dogs 5 feet. Then she went 10 feet. Wow. Next thing you know, she's riding a bicycle around the neighborhood. Next thing you know, she's going and getting training at Lilydale because this has always interested her. Her husband was delighted about this, and so was I.
Yes.
And so I was really excited about this. So I said, "Oh, the fibromyalgia groups have to know this." And of course I'd looked it up, PubMed online says, "Yes, hypnosis works. You can get out of this. You can stop it." And so I addressed the fibromyalgia groups twice. They didn't want to hear me. And from that I learned a lot about secondary gain. And I found that many people who are deeply into fibromyalgia, usually not at the beginning, but many people in a horrible way are getting something out of this. They either don't have to do jobs they hated, or they're more in control of a bad marriage. There's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of anger going on. Okay. And when I found that, I realized that a lot of the associations that are there to help fibromyalgia, and I'll say other things too, rather than saying you can get out of this, are almost self-perpetuating and keeping people in it. And what I heard when I went into these places and I looked at these people, and they were all saying, "My fibro is worse than your fibro. Let me tell you how bad it is." Well, in hypnosis, we call that self-hypnosis. Tell yourself it's that bad, it's that bad. She refused to accept that anymore. So that was my first major thing that I thought, oh, this stuff really works. And then I went into irritable bowel syndrome. It does wonders for diabetes and leveling the blood sugar. Wow. And it really works on heart. And it works very well on stress. And none of that's past lives and metaphysics.
Right.
That's just using your own self. And that's what interested me most. And that's really where I spend my time. I don't really do that much with past lives and psychics. Yes. Although that's the part that when their ears prick up when I hear that. But I tend to work mainly with the meat and potatoes situations where people are having panic attacks or people have phobias. And of course, I can give you another one. Young man, he was accepted to Teachers College in Australia. Turns out he's terrified of flying.
That's a bit of a flight.
Yes. And the funny thing was, always happens with phobias, they really don't come to me until they absolutely have to.
Yes.
And so, of course, he's flying away, in a week and a half. And I want 3 weeks. So I thought, okay, subconscious, you do your thing. And he came for 3 times with me. And he worked really hard. Again, I had CDs and I had things I asked him to do. And he got on that plane. Now, here's the interesting thing. The day he got on the plane crashed in the Hudson. Not his plane, but another one. And I thought, if there ever was a trial of a phobia, this guy has just learned that this American plane has gone into the Hudson. Had a great time, partied all the way, contacted me after he got there and said, I just had the great time that I just coming to Australia, and thank you so much for helping me get on. And the funny thing about phobias is if they're not a trauma from the past or post-traumatic syndrome, you can usually get over them in 3 sessions, even though you think that they're very dramatic and they've been with you for a long time and stuff. So.
I want to go a bit further into the secondary gain idea, because if people have those and it's like a subconscious thing, and they come to hypnotherapy, will you hit a wall, or like as in they're going, oh, I want to cure this IBS, but they actually enjoy that they don't have to go to work?
Well, that's why we have to remember I'm a school and a clinic. One person, same things.
Yes.
I do a lot of work before a person ever sees me, because I have to disabuse them of what they think they know about hypnosis. And that has been deliberately planted in our society. It's planted by people who see that they might be losing something if hypnosis continues. I would say if you don't need pills, obviously the pharmaceutical companies don't make as much money. And if this became really well done, they wouldn't be having to provide tranquilizers, and they wouldn't be having to do all these things. Then another thing that happens is Hollywood puts out that this is what you do, and they also put out that it happens to you. It's some mystical power that this other person has. It certainly isn't. It's your power. Okay. I can't do a thing if you don't want to use your power.
Okay.
Now, secondary gain, I do a lot of conscious talk. I'm a teacher. Teachers like to talk. And I also believe that conscious talk tells me a lot about the person. So I'm quite open. I ask them to read books, and I say, do you realize that a lot of this comes because in some horrible way you're getting something out of it? And if the person is honest and says, yes, I'm getting disability payments so I can stay on fibromyalgia, and I don't have to do that job I always hated. Or at that time, my husband or my wife was not completely in the marriage the way I wanted them to be. And so this way I got their sympathy, and I didn't have to do things, and I didn't have to work at changing it. And the other thing they find is that they've handed over this kind of responsibility to their body. And they say, I'm trapped, I can't do anything. And the body says, that's fine. Anytime you get close to doing anything, I'll fire in the pain, or I'll fire in the illness. And that's how the subconscious does it. As soon as they figure out that this secondary gain is going on, their own mind takes them on. And they say, no. And the other thing, they deliberately choose to fight it. So if pain comes up, they can actually talk to you and say, I know what you're doing. I'm not putting up with this. You stay just as long as you want, but I'm going right on with what I'm doing. And it goes, and it goes, and it goes. But you need to strengthen what I call the inner mind.
Okay.
In order to take it on, because they've been running a bad trance for a long time.
Is this, when people speak about affirmations working, things like that, is that actually a form of hypnotherapy?
If you can get into the inner mind with it. Too many people try to get in through the conscious way. The conscious mind is the one we're using right now, talking.
Okay.
It has usually no emotions. Well, it actually has no emotions. It has short-term memory. It has willpower. That's it. It thinks it's making decisions.
Okay.
And unfortunately, a lot of mental health workers try to get the subconscious changed by talking to the conscious mind.
Okay.
Now, in hypnosis, we tend to think of that as just another trance, the conscious mind. And it's like using a plow horse to run a race. Why don't you use the right horse to make the change?
Right.
So we don't bother a whole bunch with the conscious mind. We try to get right to the subconscious. The affirmations, I haven't been very good with them because my conscious mind cuts in saying, yeah, sure, you're going to do this. Okay, right. You get all the mind chatter going on. I find affirmations, if we call it direct hypnosis, when the person is in hypnosis, have a lot more good going for them. Okay. The other way to do affirmations is with subliminals, and I write them. And I did a lot of study of them too. And yes, subliminals work. And there's a funny saying that we laugh about where they say that psychologists say, subliminals don't work, but stay away from them. And okay. So I did a lot of study on it, and they actually were around in early 1900s. In the 1950s, a movie theater flashed Drink Coca-Cola over Kim Novak's face, and they increased their sales up 50%. Mm-hmm.
Wow.
And then we got the bad stories about it where they were used with heavy metal bands and whatever. And that was really bad. And they did have an influence. And one person actually was told to kill himself and did. And
so these stories are true. I've heard these before.
Yes, it is true.
I didn't...
It is true.
Oh.
And I have the writing to show it. It was taken to court. And it was thrown out of court because said everybody has freedom of choice, and that would be censoring free speech. Isn't that awful? When they're used correctly, they're used in dental offices to reduce stress. They're used in hospitals to control nausea, and they're actually used with weight loss and everything else. And there are ways of making them. I work with a very good sound engineer, and I embed them below music or the ocean sound, and I said, just let them be heard a little, because even I don't believe they're there, unless you let my voice murmur. Yes. And all my clients use them as they're working with me.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. Now, affirmations in that situation would probably be very useful, but you have to use Erickson, and you have to use a different man, Ellman, who does, he worked in the 1950s, and he was almost the direct opposite of Erickson, and yet had fantastic results. So I use both.
Oh, I love it. So it must make you, well, actually I shouldn't say that because I don't know how it would make you feel, but it would make me feel nervous because speaking to you and your level of knowledge, experience versus the weekend course hypnotherapists, when they're out there treating, they must have a success rate that's, may give your industry, if I can call it that, a bad name.
It's hard to say. Yeah. It's hard to say. I don't think they keep their rates or whatever. I think if they're smart, they work only with what they can work with.
Okay.
As I said, I won't make money off this because I choose people that want to really help themselves. Yes. And so I try to educate them as to what hypnosis is. You have it. You have the ability. You can take responsibility for yourself with this wonderful thing I'm about to teach you. Mm. So, however, a poorly trained hypnotist who does things like regression in the very first session can really put people off. Usually the person can't do it well. And the second thing is they're not prepared for things that come up. A poorly trained hypnotist sometimes will only do an hour and say, well, your hour's up, off you go. I do 3. If that's what's required, I just keep going until that person is suitably ready to move out of my office and move on with life. They do give it a bad name. There's ongoing wars between the associations as to who should be putting out, this is what a hypnotist should be. I don't usually agree with any of them because they're trying to satisfy everybody and lowering what should be required of a hypnotist.
Right. What's been your biggest inspiration?
Milton Erickson. This is a man who had polio and was a quadriplegic, and using hypnosis got himself fully ambulatory again. And he did it by, the first thing he did was he heard one night, and I guess this was in the 30s, that he was going to die. He heard the doctors telling his parents, and he said, like heck am I going to die? And if I am going to die, I'm going to watch the best sunset I ever did. So he watched out the window at this sunset in the morning. He's alive. And he said, Dad, did you move the tree? No, there was a tree there. But his subconscious said, well, we'll get rid of the tree so he can see the sunset. And he cured himself of dyslexia. He cured himself of color blindness. And he became fascinated with what his own inner mind could do for him as he used this. So there are still people studying this man, even though he died in the 70s, or 80s, I'm sorry, I don't know which. But he was so far in advance, and he became a wonderful psychiatrist as well. He used the mental health stuff, and he started couples therapy. He was the guy who did that. He worked in many different paths, but what he gave to hypnosis is incredible, and how he did it. And sometimes he did what was called waking hypnosis, where he's just talking to you as I am now, and yet all the right things are getting in. And he didn't have to write a script. He knew how to do it. Me, I have to write the script. I'm not that good.
There's time.
Maybe in the next life.
It sounds like an amazing man, and truly like a true inspiration. That's really interesting. Now I want to get home and Google.
And there's another one.
Share.
Randall Churchill.
Okay.
He's around now, and I've got 2 of his books that are most amazing books. And he actually have 3. But he works with Gestalt dream work in hypnosis. Amazing results. And this is a man who knows it all. He knows Erickson, he knows Ellman, and he also, I believe, is a psychologist. And if ever I have the money, I go and sit at that man's feet and watch him do that, because he's so far in advance of his time.
Lovely. I'm sure the day will come. Your final words of wisdom today?
Final words of wisdom. I guess there is a heck of a lot more that you can do using your own mind than the world trance allows you to know. By world trance, it means established thinking that doesn't want to look beyond the edges.
Beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Feir, thank you so much for your time today. It was a true pleasure spending that moment in your office, being around your passion for hypnotherapy. I admire so much your drive for excellence, your drive for the best quality education, the best quality practitioners. It's truly beautiful to witness, and I wish you much love and many blessings.